second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honeybadger Radio. Radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 359. Now what? Still a twisted sisterhood. Because I'm too lazy to come up with a new title for the same article. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. Hello. And tonight we are continuing our break from USA Spending to talk about what's happening with now. We're going to the church of what's happening with now. So last week we learned that now does their accounting by like astrology or some weird shit. You know, it's like they literally had nothing and they're mad at the woman who introduced actual accounting to their system. And there's still more in this article. In fact, we didn't finish out the section I thought we had because we got to a photograph, but there was another paragraph after it that we didn't read. But we'll get to that in a minute. Before we do that, we still got to do what we got to do. Speaking of accounting, as always, Honeybadger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justtip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, including the one you're listening on. If you're listening on YouTube, I just found one of the things I'm pissed off about today. I'm in a bitchy mood today, guys. Sorry, but I just found one of our earlier HBR Talk episodes had been privated without our consent. And so I fixed it. I was looking for it for 20 minutes because it was privated. Couldn't find it, had to log in to the company account and find it. And then I realized the reason that I couldn't see it was in my personal account was because it had been switched to private. We didn't do that. That wasn't us. So there's a few little tricks being played on our group. And I would recommend if you do talk politics on this platform or any other platform where you can designate what you're posting as public or use privacy controls to control who sees it. Like Facebook's another one that does that. You might want to double check your old stuff and see if it's still visible, because if one platform that has those type of settings is doing that, they probably all are. And this is not the first time that I've run into that. So, you know, if you want to see the video that was too scary to be public, look up. It would be HBR Talk 30. Climate of the Accountability Gap. I believe it was titled Women Most Affected, Climate of the Accountability Gap. Was disappeared until today. And now you can see it again. The whole discussion. So both the opening video and the discussion had been hidden. Don't know why. Maybe it's because we aren't allowed to blame women for things that women do. In any case, so the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, unless it's been privated by the host. as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. There you go. You can go to both places. You can sign up to watch our after shows. You can sign up to participate in our after shows. You can have a blast on our Discord and all of the fun stuff that we do there. Or you could just listen to us, send us a super chow, or share, promote the group that is too scary for social media. And there we go. And so we have been, according to CS Emperor, we are spotted. I guarantee you, I am definitely spotted all over, everywhere. I have freckles. So there you go. Let's see. And I think I have the same chat open here. So I'm going to close a window so I can see things easier. And we'll leave it at that. In the meantime, we left off last episode talking about how Now doesn't handle their accounting very well. We left off talking about what are they doing in terms of accounting? What are they doing instead of charts and graphs and all the usual stuff? But the last paragraph we read was interesting. The previous president of the organization pointed out there's a difference between criticism of doing something incorrectly, or there's a better way to do this than you're doing it, versus just getting gratuitously attacked, and that's a different story. So what do they mean by that? And of course, I finished the show wondering that. Didn't remember that there was more to the section under this image, and here it is. John Erickson, another member of the Presidential Advisory Committee and a former national board member, also characterized the treatment he witnessed by some board members as outward racism toward Nunez. He spoke with the 19th about a recent board meeting held remotely, during which he says members berated Nunez for about 20 minutes for not turning on her video camera for the meeting. Now, in and of itself, I don't think that's racist. This seems like a technical thing that she didn't turn her video on, and they're mad that she didn't turn her video on. Sounds like maybe they're assuming she's not paying as much attention to the meeting, or they want to see her facial expressions when talking, or some other such thing, right? At my workplace, my employer, if we had to have video meetings, we were required to be visible, use our cameras. And it was a problem for me because at the time, my computer did not have a camera and I didn't have a substitute. They didn't want me doing it on my phone. And I was like, well, I can either be visible or I can be on, I can follow the don't use your phone rule. And it was more important for them to be able to see me than it was to have me not do it on my phone. So their reasoning was, we want to know you're not driving while you're at the meeting. We want to know you're not doing other things while you're at the meeting because you're getting paid. And that might be the case. So what Nunez said was she attempted to explain that she was engaged in the conversation, but consoling her sick son who happened to be in her lap at the time. And remember, this isn't like a 12-year-old. It's a baby. So she didn't want to be on camera because her baby was sick and she was holding the baby. But yeah, and Richard Bier has a very solid point, said by a board that's not publicly disclosed as to who the members are. So they get money from public sources. They affect the course of public legislation in every state of the union and federally, but they don't want us to know. And yes, Gabriel, I could still drive while using a laptop or a tablet. The thing is, if I have my camera on and it's on me, they would be able to see that I was in the car, and they would be able to hear at the same time with at least with my vehicle. If I'm driving, you can hear it. It's not a quiet vehicle. I drive a van that is, it used to be a moving van. It's on a truck chassis. It doesn't go quietly. And it also has some, like, we just had to replace the spark plugs, and we just had to do some other engine work, and it makes noise. It makes noise. So they would know. And just like they would know if I was doing the dishes too, because I don't do that quietly either.
Sort of explains why so many leftists do their TikTok rants from their car.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of Europeans don't understand why they do this, and it's largely because almost every American has a car, and it's a good place where they could do it in a generally soundproofed environment. Like,
Yeah.
because I don't want to invoke a stereotype, but a lot of them live with, well, not in their mother's basement, but they live in a house with other people who wouldn't appreciate them yelling like they tend to yell about height and whatnot. They do it in their car because it's a place where they can do it, where not many people will hear them doing the yelling. And yeah, it's largely a habit of Americans, because every American has a car, because every American has to have a car.
And we do spend a lot of time yelling in the car.
Yes. It's a good place to yell because, like I say, it's almost soundproof.
Well, usually we're yelling at each other.
Yeah, I mean,
nobody can hear you yelling at them, but
I mean, it's the natural state of things, right? You're yelling at people in traffic. It's where you get your frustration out, right? Like, it's where you go and you fucking sing your heart out. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like your own little place of solitude. But I think that the reason people go and do these type of yelly, cryy things in their car is because they'd be too fucking embarrassed to do it out in public, which I understand is a conundrum. It's kind of contradictory, because they then go and post this shit online, right? To make some kind of a point, to gain, like, sympathy or interest in whatever the hell it is that they're saying. But it's just cringe. It's just cringe any way you slice it.
Oh yeah. And as to address the rest of what Gabriel said, a phone makes no difference in that scenario. It's so my employer isn't always technically savvy. They know that your phone is being spied on by the government and by Google and by Amazon and every other fucking app under the sun. Right? They haven't figured out that the same thing is true. Like your laptop computer, your tablet, your desktop computer, if you have software on it, if it is online, if like Facebook is spying on you, Google is spying on you, Amazon, even if you don't use Facebook, even if you are using an alternate browser besides Chrome, even if you have never had an Amazon, though, they're still spying on you, right?
Yep.
All of them are spying on you. Nothing on your computer is private. Even if you have all kinds of settings on your computer to keep it, it is not there, right? You don't have that privacy. And it hasn't been protected. If you're in the United States, it hasn't been protected by the one organization whose existence is supposed to be justified by protecting the citizens from this type of exploitation. Yeah. Night Motorcyclist says Microsoft's AI listens all the time, right? All of that. If you're using Microsoft OS, Microsoft is listening to you. If you're using Apple's OS, Apple is listening to you. And either one. And of course, you also have the feds spying. And my organization has privacy concerns because of HIPAA. So they you have to do everything you can to prevent any kind of breach. And no amount of explaining to the people above me, because I am just a direct support professional, so I can't possibly have any unrelated knowledge, right? I don't have a past. I don't have any experience with anything else. I'm not a nerd. I don't hang out with programmers. None of that stuff, it matters, right? So yeah, it's like, well, we have this policy and you have to follow this policy, and it doesn't matter if the policy is completely useless and doesn't have a point. You still have to follow it. Unless you want to pay for a cam for my computer. At that time, like now I have a laptop that has a cam and we use it, but we don't have to do those kind of meetings anymore. So there we go. And they really didn't like, the me explaining, well, I don't get paid enough to go buy those things. Your employer doesn't like to hear that. And it's not a tool for the job. It's like I couldn't use it at work. Privacy concerns, right? Only at home. So the COVID fiasco, like I've started calling it the dipshit crisis. The dipshit crisis is going to be remembered as America's stupidest time during Gen X's entire life. Right? That's at least since the Vietnam War.
You have to wonder if this is what's going to happen at the pearly gates. Like, because God has been listening to everything you say everywhere, ever. And when you get to the pearly gates, they sort of replay you all the recordings of everything you said, even when you thought no one was listening. And they go, what was this all about, mate? And I'm like, I didn't think anyone was listening. So I was just, riffing. I was just talking to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think that about the Jews. I was just talking to myself. But we have hell on earth now, because this can actually happen while you're still alive. Because as long as you have some device open anywhere in your house where they can hear you, and they've had speech to text software in all of these devices for the last 10 years at the very least. And yeah, if you ever do get arrested for being a terrorist, someone's going to be able to pull this up and go, what was that you said about the Jews, Mike? And I thought I was talking to myself. And yeah, it's all going to happen. It's all probably already happening.
Yeah, I think at that point, with humans, I'm just going to go all in. Fine, just go ahead and shoot me now. You're going to put me through some sort of fake trial. Why waste all the money? Just take me out there and bring your 21 gun salute, point it right at my chest. Good, we're done. Because I'm not going to be able to excuse anything, so I'm not going to try. And I guess it's the same way in the afterlife. Like you can't lie to God, right? I mean, you could try, but if something is omniscient, omnipotent, it's pointless to lie to it. So there you go. You're just gonna have to go through and everything that you used to dodge your cognitive dissonance in real life, you're gonna have to confront anyway. All the uncomfortable shit. Sounds like it's gonna be fun. But in any case, yeah, they got mad because they couldn't see her, and she had an issue that sounds to me. This sounds like a feminist issue to me. Feminists usually complain that because women have responsibilities in the home, they should be given concessions, and they're not. And this feminist organization did not give Nunez this concession. They berated her for 20 minutes for not turning on her video camera for this meeting. Now, granted, organizations that have remote meetings do have reason to want to see that you're focusing on the meeting, that you're not doing something else. But if you're in a situation, like I suppose she cared about this because of her son's privacy. Like you don't necessarily, I don't know if my kids were little, I don't think I would have been upset about letting my organization see them. Everybody would have been distracted. They would have, look at the cutie pies, but that would have been it. Because I worked with a lot of women. And and I'm sure she does too. But yeah, she goes on and says, or he goes on and says, they continue to almost make her feel bad for being a mother and woman in leadership, Erickson said. It's just antithetical to, I think, now's founding principles and what we should be doing and supporting. Nunez experience highlights a long-standing question concerning now's ability to adapt in an era where liberal progressive women skew younger and more radically diverse than the white baby boomers who make up the majority of now's leadership. So they made it racial, right? It's not necessarily racial. White people's kids get sick too, right? If my mom had been in that position when I was a kid, when I was growing up, depending on what time of year it was, there may have been more days that I was sick than there were that I wasn't. My mom raised a kid with disabilities that some of them we knew about, some of them we didn't. Literally, we had a doctor tell my parents when I was a child that if something didn't change, I wasn't going to make it to 21. And something did change. A lot of things changed. I'm 53. I will be 54 in July, and so I'm way out of warranty. I can't get any coverage on replacement parts or labor or anything like that, right? But she would have had more days than not that her cam would have been off if they'd have had that technology back then, just because either there was a sick kid right there, the house was a mess because she spent all of her time monitoring me to make sure that I didn't die. Literally slept on a beanbag in my room sometimes because she wanted to make sure I was still breathing when I was sick. So
moms are great.
Yeah, my mom was an amazing woman, and I really miss her. But yeah, I can see why Nunez might have wanted that concession, right? And I can see why this might be something that now might say, hey, we should make this concession, or we should be okay. We should assure this woman, okay, it's all right to show. We understand that your house might be messy, your environment might be messy, you might have a child in your lap. We can conduct the meeting that way anyway, but we still want to see that you're right there in front of the camera. And but instead, they made it a issue of contention. But I don't think it has to do with color, because there's no limit on whose kids get sick. I don't think there's any ethnic group, any race that doesn't have illness sometimes.
I mean, it depends what they can do with the things they inject into people. With gene therapy, it's possible to target certain races, and I won't go any further into that because I'm not allowed to.
There we go. Well, as a possessor of the motherfucker gene mutation, like if they ever figure out how to fix that, I'll be a happy camper. I can change my diet. Although honestly, most of what I have to eat is stuff I like. So there we go. But yeah, Nunez's experience highlights a long-standing question concerning now's ability to adapt. That's a big one right there. But the whole thing about it being a black and white issue, I just don't think it is. Now was founded in 1966 against a backdrop of the civil rights movement, and the budding second wave feminist movement focused on pushing for reproductive rights, workplace equality, protections against gender-based violence, and challenging rigid thinking around gender roles and women's sexuality. That's a mouthful. And when I think about this, all right, when they say pushing for reproductive rights, so I want to point out all the National Organization for Women has pushed for is abortion. They made a big deal about the pill. But when you look at the history of the birth control pill, pushing for that to be rushed forward was a bad thing. even though it did give women more control over their fertility, it also came with a significant amount of risk that was not detected when it should have been detected. And there are girls now, teenage girls, who have not yet reached the age of majority where they can vote. Girls that are actually too young to consent to sex, that are being put on birth control pills because their mom and dad doesn't think they can control their behavior, or they have other reasons, right? Like, oh, my period's too painful, I want to go on a pill, when there's like 50 other things you should try first, one of which is regulating your weight, but nobody wants to hear that. And they're having strokes, actual blood clot caused strokes. And this has been a problem for it's been in the news for about the last 15 years. So it's not something that just came along because of the most recent cause of young people having strokes. This has been a thing for a long time. When you fuck with hormones, they fuck back with you. And that's been, and there are genetic predispositions that you can have to stroke. There are other medical conditions that can make you more vulnerable to a stroke, and so on. And if you're in one of those groups and they give you hormones for birth control, which the birth control pill operates by tricking the body into thinking it's pregnant. And then you have 3 weeks of tricking the body into thinking it's pregnant, and then 1 week of doing the dash part of the ding and dash, and then you have, like the whole menstrual cycle happens, and then you go back to, oh no, seriously, we are pregnant, we just didn't know it for a week. And you do this over and over again to your body every month with this pill. So it yanks around everything that your hormones change, back and forth, every single month for as long as you're on the pill. And these problems didn't arise right away. They started happening after you had the first generation of women who were on the pill for years and years and then went off to have their babies. And then the second generation of women who were on the pill started going on pill for years and years. You started seeing a few Gen Xers here and there with this problem. And then the millennial generation, which is the third generation of women who would go on the pill for years and years and then, have their babies after they were done with all the things they wanted to get done before they had their babies. They're the ones that really started having the strokes. And so I've always suspected that there's some generational damage there, that screwing your hormones around before you have your babies has an effect on maybe your eggs that we haven't detected. So now pushing that wasn't necessarily the best thing for women, even if women wanted that control, right? Then the protections against gender-based violence. Well, here's the biggest problem with the second wave feminist protections against gender-based violence. Right? They lied. They flat out lied. They don't care about violence within relationships, and they don't care about sexual violence. They care about demonizing men. And the reason we can say that is because there are two things that they made sure to do when they did their research, their so-called research, and then their lobbying using the results of that research on these topics. One of them was they organized their research. They orchestrated their research in such a way as to avoid information about male victims and female perpetrators. They hid that information as best they possibly could. Right? And then the second thing that they did is when they lobbied, they made damn sure to make sure that Female perpetrators were not as accountable under the law as male perpetrators. Male victims were not as protected under the law as female victims. And when men were accused, their due process rights would be compromised. Right? That's not advancement. That's not progress. That's actually creating gender discrimination. So the National Organization for Women has never been a good organization. It's never been an honest organization. The challenging rigid thinking around gender roles and women's sexuality, they claim to have done that, but then at the same time, what all they really did was make up things about gender roles, like the idea that women were trapped in a domestic role, when in fact women have always worked, and it's always been a thing that women had access to. But if women chose to rely financially on a man, they could not then also have the level of control that a single woman has. Because if they're choosing to rely financially on a man, they are creating obligations for him that require that he have control over certain things in order to meet those obligations. So the National Organization for Women History and this, they're glossing this over. And remember, last week we looked at the About page, and this is I would say this is a sort of second wave radical feminist slash intersectional on some things publication. And this would be one of them. So it goes on to say, Black women played a role in NOW's leadership from the beginning. Co-founder Polly Murray was a Yale Law graduate and a member of President John F. Kennedy's Commission on the Status of Women. Remember, we get told that back in the 60s, women had no political power, right? No power and no influence. And especially Black women, no power and no influence, right? But she's on the President's Commission on the Status of Women, who challenged racial and gender discrimination in her legal writings and activism. So a little bit of history. The National Organization for Women was founded after some of the women involved in the President's Commission on the Status of Women were not satisfied with how radical the results of that commission were. They made their findings. They gave their advice to the federal government. The federal government did not go overboard. We did get the Equal Pay Act, and women did get included in the Equal Pay Act. It was initially to stop racial discrimination in pay, because it used to be legal to just pay people differently based on their race, based on their age, based on their sex, any characteristic of them, like that you could, well, this person is, they would refer to somebody with intellectual disabilities as feeble-minded. And, well, this person is feeble-minded, we're going to pay them less. And so on. Or even, this guy has 6 kids. If we want him to do this job, we have to pay him more, so we're going to pay him more. Right? So you literally had to just negotiate if you wanted more pay. And you didn't have any kind of guarantee, nobody was going to get help from the government fighting unequal pay. And the Equal Pay Act federalized control over that. And so it made it, on one hand, it made it harder to wrongly discriminate, but on the other hand, it made it harder to incentivize better work, because people could use demographic as a tool of suing. If like you have 2 salespeople and one of them does $100,000 a year in sales and the other one does $60,000 a year in sales, if one of them is a different demographic that's protected, and the one that does less sales, they can sue and say, well, it's the reason they're paying me less isn't because I do less sales, it's because I'm this other demographic, and it puts the employer on their back foot. They have to fight that lawsuit. Right. And so there's reason why it was passed, but there's also like it's kind of a sloppy thing to do it federally like that. But in any case, ever since that law was passed, women have had the right to sue if they feel like they're being paid less just because they're women. And again, it puts the employer on their back foot. They have to fight that lawsuit. They got to prove that they're not discriminating. And so there you go. So let's see. In 1970, Eileen Hernandez became NOW's second national president and the first black woman to lead the organization. So they're kind of undermining their claim here that it's a racist organization right off the top. Before the term intersectionality was coined by scholar Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989, Hernandez was one of many black women leaders drawing nuanced connections between race and gender. As said Catherine Turk, a historian and author of the 2023 book, The Women of Now, How Feminists Built an Organization That Transformed America. Remember, guys, feminists have no power and no influence, but the National Organization for Women transformed America. How did they do that?
And yet you still hear so many people blaming all of this feminism and this modern day communism and this intersectionalist bullshit on white women. I've done it myself many a time because I've fallen under the assumption that this was all started by white women. I mean, communism was started by Marx, and so it seems logical to conclude that feminism was started by white women, Germanic women, even, and yeah. Maybe it was, but to knee jerk into, oh yeah, the worst thing about our society is white women is myopic, to say the least. And I say that as someone who is myopic, so I am allowed to be ableist in that way. No, it's not just white women. It's women. It's all women. It's Caucasian women. It's Negroid women. It's fucking whatever the word is for Asian ones. Mongoloid, I think, is the technical term that we're not allowed to use. But no, it's all women. Like, let's not get confused about this. Like, any given woman that can be caught in the pincers of this movement is just as culpable for any other woman, and it always has been, and that's what we're discovering right now. This came before any of the identitarian intersectionalist race bullshit. This is why we have the race bullshit, because it was set into motion by the gender bullshit. It's why we have the gay bullshit and the trans bullshit. It seems appropriate to bring it up in June. We're not seeing much of the gay pride
men's
parade.
Mental health. Oh, the gay pride parades are out of fashion now. It's all about men's mental health.
No, they're too busy rioting about immigrants at this point.
Yeah.
This has been predicted for some time that the immigrant shit would overshadow the gay shit, and it has. And yeah, the secondary and tertiary advancements of modern Western communism have seemed to overshadow the gender-based communism, but that just it's a distraction. It all started with the gender-based communism. Well, I suppose communism has gone all the way back to the inception of the Soviet Union, and even long since before that. But then there's Charles Fourier, the French bastard who put communism into motion in terms of gender by saying that it all comes down to women.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
He's the guy that actually created the modern dictionary definition of feminism, by the way, because prior to his definition, feminism was just a synonym for femininity. It meant exactly the same thing.
As in the verb to feminize. Feminism was
yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult to say where communism came from, but it involves victim mentality. It involves the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and even before the communism we know and love involving the rich and the poor, even before that, there was the communism involving the male and the female, and it came from Charles Fourier. And history can only speculate on where it came before that.
Yeah, those ideas have been around for a long time.
Oh God, yeah.
You know, like
I mean, romantic love and chivalry, as our boy Peter Wright has been really trying to hammer home for some time now. Like this
12th century.
This has been going on for a long ass time.
Yeah,
like at least a millennium.
Well, and a different prototype of the victim narratives and demands for legal changes for women that only gave women rights but not the same responsibilities as men. That's part of what started the beginning of the end for Rome, like the Roman Empire as well. So it goes back, and I'm sure other civilizations that rose and fell experienced some. You can't have a group of people that has all of the rights but not all of the responsibilities of an adult. Right? And that's, you can't have one group of people be the shield between the state and their family, and the other adult in the family has all of the same rights but is still shielded. And so if they exercise those rights wrongly, the individual who has no control over them is responsible somehow. Right? You can't have that and have your civilization not develop problems that lead to ultimately a crumble, which is what we're seeing today. And now is part of the reason for that. They did transform America. It's why we're in so much trouble now. It's why we have so much shit happening now. It's part of why the current protests are happening right now. And I say protest lightly there because we haven't had real protests in this country very, very frequently for a long time. What we have is organizations that put out flyers and spend money on buses, and they get people from all over the country to travel across state lines to go to. So I'm getting told there's a background noise. Somebody's microphone is making noises.
Uh-oh.
I don't know who, but they get paid to travel to some location and burn it down. And it's so organized that there are pallets of bricks or somebody right there that knows how to break up the sidewalk and hand out pieces, and printed flags that they still have the fold marks in them. Okay, it's gone. The noise is gone. And so on. And, Craigslist ads offering people money to show up for the protest and everything. That's not how organic protest works, right? It's something that happens because people are angry, and you might hear about it, ahead of time. You might see a hand printed or, somebody goes to someplace and gets actual flyers printed up and saying, this is going on. If you can get there, show up. But you don't see wealthy organizations paying people to show up or paying for people's transportation, right? That's not organic. That's actually orchestrated, and it becomes a psyop. And like I said on Tuesday on HBR News, the people who get involved with this, of course there are some that are just flat out malicious people, and they're manipulating, controlling, and so on. There are a lot of people who get involved in this shit because they're dumb fucks, and it doesn't. They don't have the tools to figure out the damage that they're doing to their own country and their own futures. And they just know that they're getting, $1,000 for spending a week doing this, or 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever. It's pretty good income, right? Until you realize that it's going to cause a collapse, that income won't matter, and because everybody's trading for coffee and toilet paper. But yeah, all of that is happening because of the entitlement culture and the victim culture that feminism created in this country. And in particular, feminist intersectionality made it worse. So yeah, now transformed America. They should be ashamed of that. During the height of protests against the Vietnam War, Hernandez noted that working class men and black men represented an outsized number of military members in combat. She spoke about access to welfare and the effects of police brutality on black families. The response from white middle-class leaders of now, that's not a women's issue, Turk said. How often do feminists tell us that they care about men? Oh, we care about men. You guys don't care about men. You don't do anything for men. We care more about men than you do. But tens of thousands of men dying in a war that maybe the United States shouldn't have been involved in the first place, that's not a women's issue.
But it's men's fault.
Care, right?
It doesn't matter if men die. It's men's fault. So millions more men should die. Is that men's fault? Yeah. All right. Let's kill a bunch of millions more men. Who's in government now? Is it sort of are women involved in government now? Yes, but it's still not 50-50. I mean, women do have a 50% chance of being elected into office, but they don't run for office as much as men do. So it's still only like a quarter of women. Like, it's only one woman for every 4 men. So it's still men's fault. Okay, when has it gone too far? This is always the question to answer, to ask people. When has it gone too far? Like, how many men have to die before it's gone too far? And the answer from feminists is always, well, are there more men in government than women? Then it hasn't gone too far. Are there more straight people in office than there are gay people? Then it's men's fault. Wait, how does that connect? Because gay and straight is connected to men and women. Okay, how many transsexual people have to be in office? At least 50-50. As long as cissexual people are sending men to die, then it doesn't matter. We need more transsexual people in office. And until that happens, we don't care how many men dies. Like, it's just their way of saying we don't care how many men die. We will keep moving the goalposts until all the men have died, and then we'll still keep blaming men for everything. And we don't care how many children get killed in the womb by women. That doesn't count. At some point, we'll just blame the doctors for it, but we're not going to be able to do that yet. So we'll just keep blaming the men. Maybe because most men are doctors. Well, they're not. Well, I guess they are. But until DEI takes care of that, and most women are doctors, we'll be Why is it that? Why are so many children getting killed? Well, it's still men's fault. Shut up. Why is anything bad happening? It's because men still exist in society. Why are there still wars? It's men's fault. Why is there still famine? It's men's fault. Why is there still pestilence? It's men's fault.
Does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? Men's fault.
Do you wake up with a Charlie horse? It's men's fault.
Well, its name is Charlie. Clearly, it's related to the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Yeah. I one of these things that we've been talking about. There's a lot of what we've been talking about with regard to this article to get pissed off about, right? But this paragraph, Hernandez noted that working class men and black men represented an outsized number of military members in combat. She spoke about access to welfare and the effects of police brutality on black families. Right? This is during the late 60s. Okay? This is during the late 1960s when the baby boomer generation was in college or just starting their professional lives or just a few years into their professional lives. Some of them were still in high school, right? This is the parent generation of Gen X during the height of when they were taking control of everything. Could have addressed those issues at that time. Feminists had the opportunity in that moment to address the issues that led to gang violence all over the country, all over the United States. Every city, every state, every county had some kind of gang violence when I was growing up. Even rural counties. In my generation, we had, for those that are younger than us, we had a major phenomenon of kids killing each other over territory and stupid shit like tennis shoes, sneakers, right? Kids selling drugs, kids running around with guns in their pants. That was when it really kind of got started, was the children of the boomer generation. And yes, there has been discussion about the CIA exacerbating this and engaging in some chicanery in black neighborhoods. There's also a history of economic discrimination. Banks pulled some skeezy shit. And then the welfare system, when it was first set up, was by design creating single mother homes. And it's the black families were the canary in the coal mine. Okay. So there was all of that going on. The National Organization for Women had the opportunity to come out and say women are harmed by conditions that take the father out of the household, the father of their children out of the household. Women are harmed by the fact that the husband they rely on to help them raise their children is being sent off to war to die, or pushed out by the federal government, or trod on by the banks and discriminated against by his employer. And instead, this isn't a women's issue. We don't care about this. Especially when it was a color issue. They had plenty of time. 1960s, okay? They had plenty of time to start addressing this before in the 1990s. Teenagers were shooting each other over wearing the wrong color of shirt or bandana. How many Gen Xers had to attend the funeral of and bury a friend because these women just didn't think it was all that fucking important to have fathers in the homes? These women just didn't think it was important at all that the federal government was tearing people's families apart. How many of our generation couldn't go places that our parents got to enjoy because there was too much violence there. And how many of our kids' generation were raised in single parent homes because of the generational effects of this? These women had the opportunity to change the course of history, to restore a system that was working for the benefit of women and our children. And they decided it wasn't a women's issue and they didn't have to care about it. And now we have a drug culture in the country that kills hundreds of people a day. We have gang violence that kills hundreds of people a day. We have neighborhoods that have been completely destroyed. We have ghost town neighborhoods that were once thriving and beautiful and fun to be in, and were good places to raise a family, that nobody even can live there now. We have people who are so broken that they can't be restored.
Yeah, it gives the distinct impression that it was never about helping women or children.
Yeah.
It was about hurting men. It was about hampering and marginalizing men. And can you believe it? That's had detrimental effects on society.
Imagine what it would be like to live in the timeline where now decided that taking women's partners away from them, like encouraging women to abandon their partnership with men, was a women's issue because doing so harmed women. Imagine living in the timeline where feminists objected to the draft because killing men is a women's issue, right? Because taking men out of women's lives, taking women's partners in everything out of women's lives is a women's issue. Right? Imagine living in a timeline where now decided that actually, welfare encouraging women to boot fathers out of the homes is bad for children, and anything that's bad for children is bad for women. Like, we would have an entirely different environment today. I honestly, I look back at this, I wonder if there would have been a division like there is today among groups of people in the country if now had actually stepped up to the plate and addressed this when they had the opportunity. I wonder if the Vietnam War, if the United States would have pulled out sooner.
People often like to point to a graph about scientific and technological advances during the Greek and Roman ages, about how it went up and up and up, and then crashed down into its all-time nadir during the medieval ages. And they like to blame this on Christianity. And the dark ages over which Christianity resided. But I would like to point out that romantic chivalry resided over those ages as well. And over the centuries, we've built ourselves out of it because men were so innovative, so driven to pulling ourselves out of this hole. And it's tempting to say that, yeah, if you really push men to their excesses, then they can do the best they can. And again, some Christians will say, "Wow, well, maybe because it was because of Christianity." Like people will attribute the good things to the ideology to which they pertain, the bad things to anything but the ideology to which they pertain. And I given that almost every advancement in science and technology and the arts and the spirituality has been as a result of men discovering things and developing things, I would say the most likely explanation for the Dark Ages was this idea of hampering men in favor of women. And that's what chivalry was. That's what romanticism was. And yes, eventually men got over this, or they didn't. They were sort of forced to live within this system. And that's when we got the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. And then the modern age of all these technological developments. But in the same way, ideological atheists like to say that it was Christianity that stopped this from happening. I would say no, it's romantic chivalry that stopped this from happening. It didn't even stop it from happening; it just delayed it by some time, and then men adapted to it, as men always do. But if this never happened, then the gradual upward incline, whatever it is, towards scientific and technological advancements would have kept happening. The trend would have continued from the Greek and Roman ages, if only men were simply allowed to do their own thing. And again, you might say it did happen in the last 500 years or so, but it wasn't because men were allowed to do their own thing. It was because they were forced to do their own thing in favor of the Whammons. And if romantic chivalry had never happened, we really would be in the future by now, or the relative future. We really would have flying cars by now, rather than people constantly complaining about how transsexual people don't have all the rights they could possibly have, and all the memes about we should have flying cars by now, but we're fucking arguing about all this shit. And I'm speculating and spitballing at this point. But it's difficult to imagine a future in which men were just allowed to be men, because for the longest time, men have not been allowed to be men. They have been coerced and threatened into being agents of women's well-being. And they didn't need to be, because they were already sort of genetically aligned to be agents of women's well-being. That didn't need to be enforced. Like, men don't need to be taught to protect women. It's sort of very much ingrained in us. And there's no telling where we could be right now if society had just told men, like, fuck women. I mean, literally fuck women. Literally, just go by your instincts when it comes to women, because you'll be fine, because your instincts are to protect women. And apart from that, do your thing. If we had never had romantic chivalry, if we had never had any of the bullshit that might be associated with Abrahamic religions, I don't even know how that plays into it. But if that had never happened, we really would have gone to Mars by now. We would have gone to fucking Neptune by now. So I hope you're listening, Elon. I know you're probably not, but
no, even if anybody important is listening, a lot of times I think they respond by suppressing what we have to say, because like I said, we got pushed into the private zone on that one video. And it's not the first time, and it's not the last time. I've discovered that with other videos, and when I discover it, I always take it out of that setting. This is actually the second time I've had to do that with that particular video. So somebody is really offended by the idea that women's impact on the environment is not entirely positive. But in any case, I would say the biggest contributing factor to all the problems we have in modern era has been tolerance for female narcissism, which is basically gynocentrism, the idea that women are, just by virtue of being women, without any caveat to what that means, what is expected of women, what gives women value, etc. Just by virtue of being women, women are somehow more important and more valuable and more deserving of compassion and consideration than men. Like, that idea, it has been the single worst thing humanity has ever come up with. And it's been that idea has been the kind of thing that humanity has come up with regard to different demographic groups throughout history, and every time it ends in violence and disaster between demographic groups. You end up with genocides, you end up with wars, you end up with created famines being created, you end up with poverty. You end up with civilizations just crumbling because of it. And those are with local demographic issues. We have a worldwide problem here. We have this mind virus that has spread throughout the entire world with this idea that one demographic of people is more human than everybody else and deserves more compassion, consideration, and more of a seat at the human rights table than everybody else. And that demographic is women, and adult women. Right? They outweigh men, they outweigh children of both sexes, and as a result, we've had the changes that we've had in the world are things like behavior in between individuals being treated differently depending on whether the person engaging in the behavior is male or female, and whether the person experiencing it is male or female. So a crime carries less accountability when a woman is the perpetrator, and being a crime victim receives less compassion when a man is the victim, or even when the victim is the victim of a female perpetrator, right? And it all boils down to excusing women when they behave like that, right? We have the actual biggest cause of human death in the world, the one that doesn't get counted by the World Health Organization or your nation's main health organization, like in the United States. It's the Centers for Disease Control that documents this stuff, right? They don't count it. But the biggest cause of human death in the world is being aborted during gestation. More human beings are killed by being aborted during gestation than by heart conditions, cardiopulmonary, cardiovascular conditions, things that are cited as the leading causes of death. Cancer, war, starvation, things that we can't help, disease. All of these are outnumbered individually by being aborted. And yet women still crow about not having reproductive rights. Women have reproductive rights. They don't have any reproductive responsibilities. They're not responsible for taking control, the control that's available over their reproductive activities. Like, you have the choice whether or not to say yes. You have the choice who, with, when, how many times, what birth control you're using, what birth control you're requiring as a condition of your consent, and what you do during gestation, and what you do after birth. You can, women can still choose safe haven abandonment. They can choose adoption. They can choose to share custody with the father. They don't have to be single mothers. And yet, in the United States, that's becoming the biggest group of mothers is single mothers by choice.
But we can just define a certain kind of murder as not murder, just like we can define a certain kind of genital mutilation as not genital mutilation. We can define a certain kind of rape as not rape, and a certain kind of domestic abuse is not domestic abuse, and a certain kind of harassment is not harassment. We can just say things are what we say they are, and not what the words are supposed to mean.
But if we define a tail as a leg, how many legs does a dog have?
As many legs as we say it has. It has 12 legs because we've added another fucking 8 legs.
I think a dogapede would be the cutest little fucker. Like, but seriously,
no,
anything.
No, that would not be cute. That would be the stuff that nightmares are made of, Hannah. Oh my God.
It wouldn't be nice for the dog. It'd be adorable for the, but wouldn't be nice for it'd be like those stubby leg little cats that there was a mutation a few years back where a cat's legs was born with its legs too short, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's so cute, let's make more of them." And they are adorable, but they're handicapped. Like, it's not something you should do to your pet on purpose. And I know there's gonna be people mad at me for saying that. But they're being deliberately bred for that now. That's not fair to them. And I wouldn't do that to a dog either. I wouldn't breed a dog with 12 legs. But if there was one out there, I would certainly be hard pressed to refrain from adopting it, even though I'm allergic to them.
I wouldn't breed a dog with a weird ridge on its back, or a weird face that it can't breathe out of, or a weird set of tiny legs that it could barely run on. Sorry,
yeah.
I
wouldn't do any of that.
Pissing a lot of people off right now because there are so many dogs that are like that because they think they're cute. Sorry, that's not cute. If you think that shit is cute, there's something wrong with you.
A couple of friends. If you're familiar with our history, 7 Years in Hell guy and his wife, actually, they do dog rescue, and they do get a lot of dogs that are purebred rejects, or people have bought a purebred dog and then realized the health problems that these dogs have, and failed to take proper care or become abusive, if not neglectful. And so, yeah, it's there's a lot to be said about reining in what we are doing to animals with our ideas of what's cute. Just saying. Like, that's just a little odd tangent there. But a lot of that actually is, to be fair, female driven, right? Because when you look at the history of breeding animals, animal husbandry for farms and work, they're bred to have characteristics that make them smarter, stronger, faster, more skilled at something, like better sniffers, right? Better runners, things like that. But when you look at the purse puppy culture, those end up being the dogs that are bred to have some ridiculous health problem causing feature that makes them difficult to take care of, and often creates personality issues in the dog as well. Right now, and it's not to say that men never have bred dogs for bad purposes, because pit bulls are an example where these dogs were bred to be violent, and that you had the ones that were bred to be used as guard dogs, and then you had the ones that were clearly bred to kill each other in a pit, fighting in a pit.
And then there's the
that was male
turnspit
driven.
dog. Does anyone remember the turnspit dog? It was a dog that was bred to run on a sort of circular treadmill to turn a
To
kebab.
turn a spit. Yeah.
Yeah, because they didn't have the machines available at the time to constantly turn the spit that turns the kebab so it can be heated regularly. What a tragedy it was that the turnspit dog was genocided, right? The turnspit dog was no longer bred so that poor species that poor subspecies of dog could no longer exist. No, it wasn't. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a tragedy that such a breed of dog was ever created in the first place.
In the first place.
Whose only his only raison d'etre was to run on a circular treadmill so as to turn a fucking kebab. Well, pit bulls are called pit bulls because they were bred to fight each other to the death in pits. Like, would it really be a tragedy if that breed was discontinued?
We had one abandoned in my neighborhood not too long. It's like last summer. Possibly the summer prior. It's been a busy year. But I still remember, like, look at this poor thing. Of course, everybody's afraid to approach it because we don't know what environment it came from, and we don't know if, like, there is a genetic defect that happens with some pit bulls where they just lose their shit for no reason. And it's not the same as your regular, like, if you set one off because you've done something mean to it, or it's been trained to do something, or like 1 minute the dog is fine and the next minute it's trying to kill something. And so people kept their kids inside and everything. And then the worst part was the city organizations that are supposed to be dealing with animal problems, where somebody's abandoned a dog, or you have raccoons that are entering a building, or there's a skunk problem. Like, we had a skunk problem after the Memorial Day tornadoes. They literally got dropped by the tornado in our neighborhood. It was really bad. But they wouldn't come and get the dog. And we couldn't get any of the organizations that usually help with stray animals to come and get the dog. And we finally, through the grapevine, found a person who rescues pit bulls to come and get the dog. But it was like, without that individual, like, all of the systems that are supposed to be in place for handling a situation like this completely failed. And that one individual that took the initiative on their own was the rescue for the neighborhood and for this dog. And of course, we don't know after that what happened, because we don't know what this person found out about the dog. It wasn't somebody that we were directly connected to. But it's a really rotten situation. We had a kid in my neighborhood when I was growing up that was killed that way. Like, his neighbor had a dog that had a pit bull that seemed like just your perfectly normal dog. Nothing was going on. There was nobody picking on the dog. And yeah, it all of a sudden just snapped and just mauled this kid to death with no warning. So it's just one of those things that, my kids were grown at the time and not living here. But if they'd have been younger and we'd have been told what we were told on the phone when we called for help, I'd have been livid. I'd have been going to city council meetings. Why aren't you guys doing something about this? This is a very serious situation. This is an actual threat. This is as bad as having a coyote in the neighborhood, which we did once as well. They came and got that right away. Actually, it's worse because coyotes have a tendency to, if they see you, they're going the other direction. They don't want anything to do with you. But yeah,
And it's the
So
same. It's the same with feminists. We're not talking about killing women. We're talking about discontinuing this
gynocentrism.
breed of women that have been trained to fight each other to death in pits. All right.
Yeah, this is really a very simple situation here. Right? Compassion belongs to all human beings. It is the responsibility of all human beings, and all human beings are deserving of it, from birth to death. Period. Like that's it. Being female doesn't make you more deserving of compassion. It just makes you one half of what it means to be human. The other half is male. Right? At the same time, now leaders put their full weight behind pushing for the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, which would add specific gender protections to the U.S. Constitution. By the way, at that time, it had a caveat that it only protected women. It wasn't actually about equal protection. Then and now, some women of color within the organization felt the measure did not go far enough to address their immediate needs. Race was a problem from the beginning, Turk added, but many women of color saw enough potential in the organization's structure and mission to work through those challenges. They should have abandoned it. They should have gone off on their own and formed their own organization. Maybe that with them being less short-sighted than the other women in the organization, things would have been better today. I think things would have been way better today if they had done that. They would have at least figured out, because they seem to have understood that you can't exclude men from compassion, and you can't exclude men from your recognition of human value. Now helped change the law and culture surrounding conversations about women's rights, and it took off in the 1960s and 70s. The group served as a, quote, big tent for women all over the country to harness power through collective action on a range of issues they cared about, Turk said. Reminder, feminists claim that women have had no power and no authority, no influence. And so apparently now was completely worthless. Now it was not just about sitting around and theorizing. It was all about taking action and organizing, Turk said. You could form a chapter anywhere. You just find 9 other people. It's this flexible tool that's strong enough to be lobbying before Congress and influencing the national policy debate, but it's locally rooted. That sounds like power and influence to me. Doesn't that sound like power and influence to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
How dare you?
I mean, we've been told for the last 20 years of pushing for equally shared parenting rights, for the last 13 years or so of being online doing it, that feminists are not our enemy. It's the patriarchy that's responsible for all of the legal changes we're complaining about. Feminists have had nothing to do with that. That's what we've been told. We've been told that feminists didn't change intimate partner and sexual violence law. Feminists didn't attack due process. Feminists didn't do anything to hinder family court reform or none of that stuff was related. Feminist organizations have achieved nothing over the last 60 years or so. But now, then, according to this article, this is a very powerful organization. This is like one of the most powerful organizations in the country. And by the way, this is the organization that for the last 60 years, they fought every advancement that fathers have made in family court where custody is concerned. They opposed joint custody as a thing. They wanted the default to be maternal custody with paternal visitation in every divorce, and all the divorce would be no fault, but men, if they wanted custody of their children, if they wanted a different arrangement than that, should have to fight for it in court, according to feminists, because otherwise they would abuse their children. That was their argument, that judges would be placing children with abusive fathers, right? They demonized dads as deadbeats and abusers. They said men only wanted to be around their children to avoid paying child support. That was their argument. And then when joint custody became a thing, and fathers groups started pushing for shared parenting laws, which added some rights to the joint custody arrangement, but pretty much left the time division alone. Feminists got they pulled that same argument out of their asses and claimed that this would result in more child abuse and less child support. They argued that men only wanted to be in the loop on medical decisions for their children and decisions in the school system and stuff like that, so that they could deny their children resources and abuse them. Right? That was their argument. And then, of course, now that equally shared parenting is a thing being pushed for, where it's like 50-50 time, they're going ballistic, and they've pulled out that same argument out of their asses that men only want time with their kids to avoid paying child support, when in reality what they're doing is they're projecting. It's women only want to deny fathers time with the kids because they can use doing the majority of caregiving as an excuse to collect child support. Women only want full custody with scant visitation, because if they only have the kids half the time, they don't have an excuse to demand child support, especially if they have equal earning capacity. So, when it comes down to it, feminists tell you one way or another what's on their minds, right? And since between 70 and 80% of divorce involves the mother forcing the father out of the house, literally filing for divorce, having the police come and tell him he has to leave, and then demanding money, right, from him. It's pretty obvious what's actually going on here. But for the last 60 years, National Organization for Women have argued that women should be able to do that, to kick a man out of the house and still retain all access to his wallet. And anything that they think might interfere with that access to his wallet, they blame on men. But the tension between women of color and white women within the organization persisted, it says. It continued to deepen into the 1990s and 2000s as the subject of intersectionality gained more popularity. So, and this is fitting, because in the 1990s, that's kind of when the epidemic of unwed motherhood kind of started to take off, and the divorce epidemic started to take off. You also had the issue of the epidemic of teenage violence started to take off, because you had more kids being raised in homes that the father had been evicted from by the mother and by the state. So yeah, of course, with this hitting the Black population and other minority populations harder and first, because of the circumstances being different in how it was introduced. Yeah, it would have created more tension. Even well into the 2000s, intersectionality was a word that confused and even angered many of NOW's white members, O'Neill said. O'Neill recounted that during her time as president in 2013 or 2014, she pushed to change NOW's statement of purpose to include a focus on intersectional activism. The subject ignited fierce debate during a national conference, she said. Well, there's a reason for that, right? NOW also includes radical feminists, and radical feminists are not necessarily intersectional. And intersectional feminists have tried to bring men and masculinity into feminism. They sort of try to co-opt men's issues. So radical feminists are anti-male all the way. And because they are anti-male all the way, and gender feminists are sort of radical feminist light. Radical feminists are gender feminist heavy. They all are at odds with each other. And so you have at the trans movement sort of came out of intersectional feminism. And oddly enough, gender feminists and radical feminists refer to trans women as men's rights activists. So it's gone for full circle. Like, they can't make up their minds what they do and don't support as a movement, and the subsections of feminism infight. But they do all have the victim narrative, the patriarchy victim narrative, as their underlying scaffolding. Every version of feminism is built on that.
They have made their minds up as to what they don't support, and it's men and their rights.
Yep. Intersectional feminists will pretend they'll talk about men's issues from the perspective of treating men as being broken because of the ways in which they are different from women, instead of talking about men as having deserving independence from female control. Like, they won't agree to that. But the Subject United fierce debate said, "There's women at the microphone yelling at me, 'Take that word out of there. Nobody knows what it means. We will look stupid,'" O'Neill said. I believe, there we go. "This exchange captured a growing generational divide that continues to plague now," O'Neill said. "White women, baby boomers, raised on the flawed promises of a colorblind society, are angered by critiques that force them to examine their own roles in a white supremacist patriarchy." So again, you have two subsets of feminism at war there, right? There's the utopian feminism of Fourier that believed that you could erase the conflicts that arise around differences between people of different backgrounds, cultures, races, capabilities, religions, and so on, rather than learning to navigate those conflicts and negotiate those conflicts. They have to go away.
How do we control our own men? Do we control them because they're men, or do we control them because they're white? And again, the same thing happens with any other given race or sub-race of women. It's always been about controlling their own men, the men that they consider to be their property. And it's the same with the government. The government's only interested in controlling the people they consider to be their property. And in the West, that is Western men, which is predominantly white men. That's what it's the same thing. I call it oikophobia a lot, but it's sort of more sinister than that. It's that we are white, and so we must control the white people. We are men, so we must control the male people. And it's not as though we are female, and so we must control the female people, because this whole ideology started with feminism, which is we are female, so we must control the male people who we consider to be our property. And in the case of white women, that meant we must control our white men, which only took off in the last half century or so. But it sort of explains why there's been this unholy alliance between Western women and Eastern men.
Yeah.
Because Western women don't consider Eastern men to be their property. They see them as guests on their property. and they don't really care how much they get raped by those Eastern men.
Well, or they use threat of that as a means of controlling their men too. During the 60s, when this was playing out, the beginning of the conflict between different segments of the National Organization for Women, white women were still using men, men of color, men of minority status as a, I guess, a MacGuffin, or basically, oh, you have to do these things to protect us from these other men of other racial backgrounds, and treating them like they were savage and dangerous and scary, and then flirting with them and so on, but then turning around and pretending to be offended or pretending to be victimized by the result. There was quite a bit of that still going on during the 1960s. All right, I'm getting a weird message from Restream. I need people to let me know if they can still hear us. That's really weird. And it just disappeared. So hopefully everything's. Maybe it was just my internet connection being stupid. It did that on Tuesday too. So, but in any case, yeah, that just kind of technical difficulties with the Badgers. So I'm just going to answer a question from chat. Chris Mizumo wants to know why women have excluded men from the family. So the first, good, I'm glad you can hear me. The first thing that seemed to persuade women to kick men out of the family actually was welfare dollars. So money was the original reason for the uptick in women kicking men out of the family. They basically got paid by the government to do it. And the statements made by women in surveys are often that they have complaints that really boil down to a lack of compassion for men. Women kick men out of the family because they don't care how a guy's work may be different from their office job. They want him to come home from his construction job and before he rests or anything else, vacuum the carpet, wash the dishes, do the laundry. They don't want to count if he does yard work or fixes the car or fixes that creaking step on the stairway as housework, by the way. And as it turns out, they also don't want to count if he does the laundry, the dishes, or the vacuuming. When you look at statistics on who does housework and how much, you find out that women, if they put a load in the washer and then the washer runs for an hour and then they take the load out and put it in the dryer and the dryer runs for an hour and then they spend 20 minutes folding it, they count that as 2 hours and 20 minutes worth of work. Whereas if a man does the same exact thing, those 2 hours don't get counted. Then he counts it as 20 minutes worth of work. And when you count equally so that the same aspects of the jobs are being counted and the time related to those aspects is being counted equally, you find that men actually do more housework than women. Men also work longer hours at more often harder jobs, jobs that are maybe less emotionally rewarding but more necessary in society, and so on. And so you find that overall, between housework and labor at work, men are doing more. But women get resentful and they push them out. They get bored and they push them out. Most of the time when women initiate divorce, it's not because of abuse and it's not because of cheating. It's because they don't recognize what the man is doing, and so they treat him as though he's not doing as much, and they resent him, and instead of talking about it, they let it build up in their heads until they've changed their minds about the relationship, and then they initiate divorce. And they can because they get paid for it. The state steps in and takes the man's place. So it's a really bad system. And the National Organization for Women pushed for that. We did get a super chow just now from Meredith G. She gave us $5 and said HBR Talk 359 honey for the Badgers. Thank you, Meredith. I'm gonna go ahead, and I think we are close to the end of this. We may not be. Yeah, we are. We're close to the end of this article, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish it up. We just read white supremacist patriarchy, which the patriarchy of feminist imagining doesn't exist, and the white supremacy of feminist imagining doesn't exist either. They see their own oppression very, very, very clearly, and it's very hard for them to see the oppression of women of color in any other terms than the terms of their own oppression, she said. O'Neill, a white woman, admitted that she also made mistakes and faced criticism from women of color during her time in Now's leadership and had to evolve the way she considers the intersections of different marginalized backgrounds. Erickson said Now's leadership remains stuck in the past, which he believes is contributing to declines in membership and could threaten the organization's sustainability. Thank God. And I will say this. The National Organization for Women's failure to consider the impact on families when men are taken out of the home did a significant amount of damage specifically in the Black population of the United States. So it is fair for Black feminists to be angry at white feminists for this. What is their big mistake here is that thinking that feminism is not the problem, that racism is the problem. Right? Feminism is the problem because feminism blames men solely for all of the issues faced in the world by women, when in fact we just, as by talking about this and talking about what feminism changed and what happens in families when you take the father out of the family, when you get this increase in likelihood of criminality, this increase in likelihood of unwed parenthood, and the issues then become generational. Feminism causes a lot of women's own problems. Like if feminism never existed, a lot of the problems that women face today would either be significantly reduced or non-existent altogether. And so Black feminists are looking at the wrong vehicle to solve the problems that they are asking feminism. And actually, Chris Mizumo wants to say that men also voted for Big Daddy government, but the problem is that that's not actually true. Right? More men vote against expansions of government. More men vote to keep their money. More women vote for safety nets. And our entire culture changed when women got voting rights. Right? The first thing that they started doing was voting for candidates that promised them safety nets and government programs and expansion of social programs that our country was never supposed to develop. So yeah, we're in a situation where it's really not acceptable to claim that men are as responsible for women as women for this. And no, Black feminists don't need to get to the back of the bus. They need to ditch the bus and get themselves a more effective vehicle, because the bus isn't taking them anywhere good. This is a bad bus. So Erickson said Now's leadership remains stuck in the past. We read that one. In 2020, in a 2020 interview with the Daily Beast, Yazzie stated that Now wanted her as a token rather than a full functioning vice president. Nunez did not use the word token in her own description, but she said she and Yazzie shared similar experiences. Externally, Nunez said she received overwhelmingly positive feedback from Now members and other outside observers. During her time as president, Nunez led initiatives like Now's Unlock the Future campaign, which demands humane treatment for detained immigrant families, particularly women and girls fleeing sexual violence, assault, and poverty. She also spearheaded racial equity training across the organization, including Now's grassroots chapters. The board did not push back on these initiatives because it makes the organization look good, Nunez said, but the broader pushback she faced made it difficult to do her job. The internal strife at Now reflects a larger flashpoint in liberal political leadership during President Donald Trump's second term. Democrat leaders appear to be torn between pressure from moderate and progressive voters who all want the party to fight harder for their needs. So the more I'm looking at this, the more I'm seeing that their problem with her isn't because she's black. Their problem with her is because she doesn't have a narrow vision. She's got a broader vision. Pun intended, I guess. And the people who have a problem with her don't have that broad of a vision. That's an issue. She may be better for the organization, although personally, I would like to see the organization fizzle out and like wither on the vine. I don't think it's a good organization. I'm not even sure someone like this could redeem it, because they're all still coming from the idea that man bad, woman good, and man evil, woman victim. It's like it's an issue, and I don't know that even having a broader vision that includes recognizing the need for men and women to work together can redeem an organization that has that as its backbone. It's just a thing. If your organization's scaffolding is poisonous, you can't build a non-poisonous organization around that. In the weeks after the 2024 election, liberal advocacy groups told the 19th that today's political movement or moment calls for more strategic action rooted in grassroots organizing. Like, Now hasn't always done that. Women of color organizers say that more work needs to be done nationally and locally to center their perspectives. National organizations like Now, the Feminist Majority Foundation, and the American Association of University Women have grappled in recent years with accusations of racism and claims that toxic white feminism runs rampant. O'Neill said she questions whether Now, with its current structure and leadership, is capable of meeting those demands for change. Nunez says she sees some promise in local Now chapters, but a bigger shift needs to happen in national and state leadership. I think some chapters are effective in leading from an anti-racist and intersectional approach, Nunez says. However, the alienation many women of color experience and reported experiencing makes it very challenging for Now to move forward authentically and intentionally. So what we're seeing here, I think, is a war between gender feminists and intersectional feminists. And the intersectional feminists are using their broader spectrum of isms and phobias as a weapon against gender feminists. The intersectional feminists, in terms of their opposition to gender feminists, have some points, but every single one of those points undermines their female victim narrative. So I don't know what's going to happen with feminism, which group is going to ultimately win. If they want to continue to believe in the idea that masculinity is the root of all evil and femininity is the root of all salvation, they're going to have to abandon intersectionality, because it's not a racial issue, it's not a sexuality issue, it's only a gender issue, right? But if they want to bring in the idea that these issues can affect people on the basis of these other characteristics, even if they're male, they're going to have to abandon the gender aspect. If intersectionality takes over, you'll probably see feminists at some point having to abandon patriarchy theory. And who knows where the movement will go from there if they abandon patriarchy theory. It'll be an interesting thing to watch.
They'll never abandon patriarchy theory. They'll keep parasitizing men, both the intersectionalists and the, I don't even know what the opposing faction of feminism is even called, that opposes intersectional feminism.
Gender feminists.
They call it white feminism. They call them TERFs or whatever. But it doesn't matter, because they're going to keep parasitizing men for as long as they can get away with it, and they will keep getting away with it, because even the people we call right wing are still talking about how we can best protect women against either against whatever faction of men, either section of the feminist war is going to keep demonizing as the problem, whether it's men pretending to be women or men in the Middle East or whatever. They're gonna keep going. We need to fight back against men, because men are the problem. Like, this is all I hear from the right wing, and it's all I hear from the left wing. We have to save certain kinds of women from the men of their cultures, and it's just going to carry on, because there's not many people speaking out against it. It's kind of us and a few other space lepers, and they're going to keep and they're going to keep going. Those people are full of shit. We need to save women. We need to save some of the women from some of the men, because, and I don't want to say it's genetically built into us, but it's been sociopolitically built into us for so long that there's very few people out there who can even see through this bullshit, and people are gonna keep going. Yeah, we need to save the men. We need to save the women from the men. It might be the women here, it might be the women over there, but yeah, it's always going to be, we need to save some of the women from some of the men, and the vast majority of the population is never going to even consider the idea that maybe women don't need to be saved.
Yeah. If anything, if women need to be saved from anything, it's themselves. It's these dumb ideas that women have come up with. But when it boils down to it, like what we're basically looking at is women using victimhood as a shield against being accountable for themselves and their decisions in a variety of ways. That's basically it. When we stop allowing that, our society will have an opportunity to advance. But I will also leave you with a question, all listeners. I want you to consider something, because we, in our previous episodes, prior to getting into USA Spending and everything, we've been going through history and looking at the history of suffrage. And we still have upcoming issues or discussions that I still have to get them organized. But I need to talk about war history in relation to this, because you can't separate the history of voting rights from the history of war. They are intertwined. In fact, the history of war caused the history of voting rights. So, but I will point this out. When we have looked at the history specifically of women's voting rights, what we have found is that women's interest in voting rights was not a grassroots movement. It was establishment-led, establishment promoted and pushed, and the women of the grassroots had to be browbeaten into it. They had to be consistently bombarded with, you want this, you need this, you have to have this, you have to want this, you're not really a good woman if you don't want this, you're hurting other women if you don't want this, and so on. You shouldn't have the right to vote on this, by the way. We want to make the men just give it to all women, whether you're asking for it or not. And then eventually the establishment got what it wanted and women got voting rights. The establishment's purpose for that was not to benefit women. So you ought to consider what they really wanted when they did that. Because the thing that happened afterwards was that the political establishment, the business establishment, the government establishment, they all got more power. Significantly more power over the lives of individuals in every country where women got the right to vote. So with that, we don't have any other super chats, super chows, or rumble rants or anything. I will end the episode. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to my two co-hosts for going over this article with me.
Word.
Next week, we are going to find out what the National Organization for Women is mad about in regard to the current Trump administration.
Oh, no.
And so that's what you have to look forward to next week. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next Thursday. Good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.